Hello and welcome to the Swine Disease Reporting System. This is the podcast number 46 for the month of December. My name is Edson Magalhães here at Ohio State University.
Hello, my name is Giovanni Trevisan here at Ohio State University.
Hello, Daniel Linhares, also at Ohio State.
And today we're going to cover the findings from the month of November from the 4 VDLs that are included at the SDRS. But also we have the pleasure to have today as our special guest Dr. Pete Schneider. So Dr. Schneider is a field veterinarian at Innovative Agriculture Solutions, and he practices in several states and has an extensive background in swine health and production, including, for example, health management strategies, disease eradication, diagnostics, and biosecurity program. Welcome, Dr. Schneider. It's a pleasure for us to have you here.
Yes, thank you for having me. It's always fun to talk with you, Edison, as well as Giovanni and Daniel. You guys are extremely smart, so I always come away from these conversations feeling like I learned something. So thanks for the opportunity to be here today.
Oh, thank you. So, Dr. Schneider, usually in these records, in the podcast, we do a first question, overall question for the guests. So this overall question for you, in your opinion, what is the value of programs like the SDRS for the swine industry? How does it help you to make decisions on a daily basis?
Well, I think we're all very busy, right? So it's pretty easy to get wrapped up into the challenges that we have going on. And those may not be, indicative of what are going on around us in the industry. So I think it allows us to pull our focus back to, what is happening out there, reorients us a little bit so we can walk into a barn and not always feel naive to the situation we come into if it's a deviation from what we were expecting. So again, it gives us a heads up on what's happening out there. And again, it's nice to see those trends and things we should be expecting down the road if we're not seeing them already.
Yeah, no, that makes total sense. Thank you. So let's get started. So as we usually do, we're going to start covering the PCR detection for PRRS, and then we go for enteric coronavirus, and lastly to mycoplasma. And the last page of the report is disease diagnostic, specifically from Ohio State University. So here on the first page, which covers the PCR detection for PRRS, Giovanni, what were the findings from the month of November in terms of PCR detection of PRRS?
Well, we are having a busy month. The detection of PRRS virus is in a moderate increase, and that's going on in wing to mark age category since September. And now we start to see an increase in adult sow farm. So we have been seeing this year over year that increasing detection of PRRS virus in wing to mark has been preceding the detection in adult sow farm, and that's happening again this year. One of the things that we are keeping close look is the PRRS virus Lineage 1C variant strains, and the majority of the detections that occurred during November by sequencing was from Iowa and Minnesota. So this month we went through and asked for the advisory group if the U.S. swine industry has been moving the needle towards implementing biosecurity, biocontainment practices to reduce the spread of agents across farm. And the answer was unanimous that the U.S. swine industry has been moving the needle, especially after the entering of PED. Lots of things have been done, but still have a lot of opportunities to work towards these improvements. And some of those things is simple things like implementing bench, change clothes between site-specific use of clothes, shower in, shower out facilities, especially in the finishing in growing sites that we need to do. There is a need for improve the way we wash our trucks, especially movements to marketing, and try to implement better way to separate peoples from going to different farms in different days, focus on growing, finishing, biosecurity. That was one of the major ones that was coming out. And one point that was brought to our attention is that the U.S. industry has been moving the needle in this way. But to move for the next level, in many regions there is a need to implement a lot of investments, and that's not quite easy to do at this moment.
Mm-hmm. Dr. Schneider, as Giovanni mentioned, so we're seeing this typical kind of year in terms of detection of PRRS. In your experience, from all the states that you work and all the producers, the experience that you have, how have been your experience with the emergence of PRRS strains?
Yeah, so I've been fortunate enough to not have to deal with some of the Lineage 1C variants to this point on sow farms, but being in Iowa, I know it's coming. So it's been good to be able to talk with other vets that have been able to, well, I guess that have unfortunately had to deal with those and talk about their experiences. For me, we have definitely seen it in the wean to finish production side of the work we do. And it's been eye-opening with the amount of virus that's replicated in those pigs that become ill with those strains. We're not doing many quantitative PCRs, but just based upon CTs, it's been extraordinary the low level of CT values that we've been picking up on many of these strains, and so certainly it just tells us there's a lot of virus floating around out there, and just makes it again ever greater for us to focus on the wean to finish biosecurity.
Mm-hmm. And digging a bit further, we are all data kind of driven guys, right? And so thinking about metrics, specific metrics you use to make decisions on controlling and eliminating PRRS and keeping track of that over time. What are some? Can you share some of the metrics you have used?
Well, I think from a metric standpoint, to make decisions on PRRS, again, we're certainly looking at the cost and the dollar figures that we're experiencing from these disease entries, right? Specifically on the sow farm end, mm-hmm. and we're saying, hey, how important is this for us to make sure that we get this virus off the farm, and also looking at the rate of breaks that we're seeing in sow farms and making decisions again, is it feasible long term to keep the virus out of this farm, or what's our best opportunity to make this farm as productive as possible? I think the biggest thing that we want to make sure is we've got clear communication amongst the folks that are in the barns, the ownership groups, or owners of the pigs, and the veterinarians, to make sure our expectations are all in line, mm-hmm. And make sure that, again, we've got a game plan. So oftentimes when we're talking about PRRS elimination projects or whatnot, we're laying out timelines with specific goals that we want to achieve by then with testing, looking at, again, negativity by certain time points, as also along with the tasks that we need to complete, that we feel like we need to complete to get there. And we expect to see deviations in these, right? As you guys have shown with the family oral fluids and processing, with our timelines can often get skewed when we're from what we're expecting. So we need to be nimble and able to make these changes. But as long as we've got good communication, I find that's the key to success in any of our control programs that we put in place.
Oh, great. Thanks for your comments. So let's move on to the next page, which covers the enteric, the PCR detection of enteric coronavirus. Giovanni, what were the findings from the previous month?
Well, enteric coronavirus is not as busy as PRRS. Mm-hmm. The detection is similar in November to what we saw in October. It's expected that we have some increase in detection now during the colder months. We saw a small uptick in Delta coronavirus coming from growing sites, samples that were identified as coming from this age category. But the very exciting thing that here is that it's not going up the detection as for PRRS. And we are already in November, and during 2021, we tested more than 1,000 samples for TG, and only 3 submissions was positive for that agent. So the same things that we talked before for PRRS virus that was reminded by the advisory group in terms of biosecurity by containment still applies for enteric coronavirus. And on that, Dr. Schneider, I want to pick your brain on this. Has the U.S. swine industry moved the needle in terms of biosecurity by containment? What do you think about that, and what are the low-hanging fruits that we could tackle to do better in terms of this contained spread of the agents across farms and regions?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I think when the emergence of PED happened in 13 and 14, we definitely picked up our game in terms of transportation biosecurity and on-site biosecurity, even for personnel entry. Mm-hmm. I do think sometimes we try to put the cherry on top of the ice cream sundae before we've got the banana and the whipped cream on there, though, at times. And I think one area we really need to focus on is better training for our biosecurity for our wean to finish caretakers and understanding the importance of what they do. We've got many caretakers that are touring 5 or 6 sites in a single day, and even across different systems, production systems. So, again, they pose a lot of risk to a lot of pigs on a daily basis. And we need to be thinking about that. How can we make it easier for those folks to keep disease out? So whether that's going back to our scheduling and saying, hey, can we streamline this producer's or the sites, right? Streamline this caretaker sites to keep that biosecurity on the same level in terms of pig health. I think that could go a long way in terms of making that a difference. And again, I think the other part is we've talked a lot about market hog transportation, but certainly I think we still need to be talking about feeder pig transportation and making sure we're getting those trucks washed. I think we notice a lot of our biosecurity breaks happening around those time points where we're moving pigs from nurseries or overstocks. And are we making sure that those trucks and those truckers are following good biosecurity before we load those trucks up and move those pigs out? So I think those are a couple areas I think to continue to focus on and put our efforts in. And
you brought here one very good point, that is the training of people. And when you think about biosecurity, that's not only when you are seeing a crisis all year round that you need to continue to remind everybody, training your personals to do that. Great point.
Training and communication, right, that talks about too. So one follow-up question on that grow finish site, right? Could you share some of your perspectives on what's the general importance of that for the whole ecology of pathogen detection, thinking about both PRRS and the enteric coronaviruses? You mentioned some of these already, right? But some more, picking your thoughts here on what else can the industry do in terms of grow finish more specifically, and in regards of keeping those pathogens in the industry.
Right. No, again, at the sow farm end, I think we do a very good job with diagnosis. Any deviations in health, we're generally having some samples submitted, getting the diagnosis on what's happening. But in wean to finish, I think we lack to some extent on that end of it. I would venture to guess that for every diagnosis of disease we get in wean to finish, we probably miss at least one. So there's a lot of unspecified health sites out there that could pose a risk because we're just not aware that there's a health challenge at those sites. The other thing, I often think about is as we flow pigs, we're always talking about sending pigs that are of low health, pigs that are diseased and challenged into high density areas, because again, we expect that there's going to be a movement of disease in those areas anyways. So, but for me, again, what if we look at it the opposite way? Do we need to start thinking about trying to move high health pigs into high density areas? It seems like we'd make a bigger impact in terms of segregating our disease pigs in lower density, as we talk about that with human disease, right? As we talk about with COVID and flu, don't go to work if you're sick. Well, again, we do that to keep sick people away from healthy people. So, do we need to do the same thing to some extent and segregate our diseased animals better than we are today? And just a thought, again, I know that's atypical of probably the way the industry looks at it, but I certainly feel like we talk about recombination of PRRS virus. Well, if we start to put a lot of PRRS positive pigs into a pig dense area, we're really promoting that. So we're promoting higher diversity and maybe our strains of PRRS that we see out there. Between that and obviously mutations are going to happen as well. But I think we could start thinking a little bit maybe differently about how we should flow these pigs and where we need to put our diseased pigs at to reduce that amount of diversity of viruses we see out there.
Maybe need for a comeback of these coordinated structure regional programs, right, to help manage some of those diseases.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, great point. Something that we all should consider. So let's move on to the next page, which covers the PCR detection of mycoplasma. Giovanni, what were the findings from the previous month?
Well, we know from historical data that the transition months of fall, we have the highest detection of mycoplasma. And during October and November, the detection was very similar between those 2 months. So there is not lots of things going on in mycoplasma, and this is within expected for this time of the year.
Yeah, so question for you, Dr. Schneider. By practicing in a couple of different states, you can see that the industry, from different perspectives, right, like you just mentioned, and also there are different approaches to tackle mycoplasma detection or eradication or control in different regions. Could you share your thoughts and perspective on dealing with mycoplasma?
Yeah, I generally haven't pushed much of a mycoplasma eradication process with many of my clients that feel like they have good mycoplasma stability in their herds, and I think that's key. If they felt like they had more concerns, then certainly we'd be talking more about that. But most of the clients that I have that are running mycoplasma positive herds are doing a good job with acclimation of gilts at a younger age. They're not seeing clinical signs of disease in the sow farm end, or specifically not carrying over into the wean to finish flow and affecting that production. We're not finding mycoplasma as a comorbidity in diagnostics being submitted for influenza or PRRS or other respiratory pathogens. And so I think overall they feel pretty comfortable with that process and where they're at. So don't need to take the time and money to go through an eradication process. Now, if we're looking at eradicating a different disease for some reason, and it makes sense with the timing and the program, well, then certainly that's the conversation piece. But again, maybe I'm the oddball there, I guess. But we have not pushed that as a large piece of our practice at this point.
Thanks. And now let's cover the last page of the SDRS report. Now the page that covers disease detection, disease diagnosis, specifically from the Iowa State VDL. Giovanni, what were the findings of disease of the pathogens diagnosed on the previous month?
Well, there was an uptick of some respiratory and systemic agents at the end of October, and those was mostly PRRS, PCV2, Mycoplasma pneumoniae, Glasella parasuis, Streptococcus, and now in the beginning of November was signals for influenza A disease diagnosis. When we look for the here mirror, there was a lot of pigs that were challenged with viral disease in the last couple of months. So the advisory group said that this is one of the potential reasons for that, where the secondary agents that find an opportunity to express out disease. And on top of that, we have been seeing some changes in temperature with some very drastic swings in terms of the hot, cold days, and that may also be contributing in terms of keeping a good environment for the animals and affecting the respiratory tracts and the open opportunity for these agents.
And Dr. Schneider, going back to what you said, for example, not on PCR detection, but disease diagnosis, if we also do a better job on diagnosing disease on the growing phase, also could be change a little bit of the dynamic of, for example, what we are seeing here in the data, because we might not have too much like we do in the sow farm, right?
Yeah, certainly. And again, as you guys pointed out, some of the area regional control programs were probably doing a very good job with routine surveillance of growing pigs. And I think, again, it could be something that we look more at. The other thing I see, going forward is the need for maybe inborn testing, right? So we're talking about these quick antigen tests, rapid antigen tests, other SNAP tests we see in the small animal world. Are these things that we could implement if we had those available in our industry and use those for PRRS or PD, even if the sensitivity and specificity is a little bit less than what we would expect with some PCR testing? Maybe having that answer more quickly eliminates some of the hassle of having samples get sent off, and maybe lets us make decisions in terms of caretaker movements and feed truck movements, trucking movements, all these things a little bit quicker as well. So again, anything we can do to increase the ease of surveillance in our wean to finish production, I think is going to be a big game changer for us in terms of disease control.
Yeah. And I like what you said, like if you are sick with COVID, you don't go to work, and should maybe start thinking the same thing for the pigs, right, in high dense regions. That's a great point. Mm-hmm. So as our final question to wrap up this discussion, we usually do this question for our guests. So how do you envision, Dr. Schneider, the future of diagnostic and surveillance in the swine industry?
Yeah, and again, going back to that, I think we need to continue to make it easier for us to get samples and get answers, right? So again, whether it's the Inborn testing, again, but you guys have done a wonderful job. The processing fluids, family oral fluids, all these ease of sampling techniques that we have today have certainly increased that level of compliance on the farm end. but also have increased our ability to get good answers on more animals. So again, I think you guys have moved the needle tremendously, and everybody there that's been working on those projects has moved the needle tremendously on that end of it. So, for everybody in the industry, I'd like to say thank you for that as well.
Oh, thank you. So that was it for our discussion. Thanks a lot, Dr. Schneider. It was a pleasure to have you here. And thanks also, Daniel and Giovanni, for joining us. And see you guys next month. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Have a good one.